Imagine a world where the decisions of a group of citizens could determine the fate of an entire society, a world where a small people managed to stop a colossal empire, forging not only their own freedom but also the foundations of our civilization. It really happened, thousands of years ago, and the story is more compelling than any modern epic. Welcome to a journey through ancient Greece, a land of myths, philosophies, and conquests that have shaped the way we think, govern, and create art. In this video, we won't just flip through pages of history, but explore the pillars that made Greece a beacon of civilization: the ingenious structure of the Polis, the epical struggle against the Persian Empire, the unrivaled splendor of the age of Pericles, and finally, the unprecedented expansion of Greek culture thanks to Alexander the Great. Get ready because we're about to discover how ideas born in small city-states ended up influencing an entire world. The history of ancient Greece is the history of a revolutionary idea, that of the polis. It was not simply a city, but the beating heart of an identity, a political, social, and religious center where the life of every individual was intrinsically linked to the community. Imagine living in a place where the concept of citizenship wasn't just a title, but a set of deeply felt rights and duties, an unwritten pact between you and your community. But not all polis were the same. Far from being a monolith, they were a mosaic of social and political experiments, with two models standing out above all for their diversity and influence: Sparta and Athens. On the one hand, we have Sparta, a polis that we could define as a perfectly oiled military machine. Here, life revolved around a single purpose: the defense of the state and the maintenance of its peculiar oligarchy. From birth, Spartan children were valued for their robustness; those deemed weak could be abandoned. At 7 years old, boys were taken from their mothers and placed in the agoge, a brutal and rigorous training system that lasted until the age of 20. They learned to endure pain, hunger, and cold, to fight with iron discipline, and to obey without question. Their diet was frugal, their clothing basic, and the only music they heard was the beat of the march. Spartan women, although they did not fight, enjoyed greater freedom and influence than other Greek women because they were the mothers of future warriors and were expected to be strong and healthy. Their primary function was to generate and raise strong children for the homeland. The government was in the hands of a few: two kings, one for war, the other for religious and civil functions, a council of elders and the ephors who held the real executive power. There was no room for individualism or personal expression. Everything was subordinated to the higher good of the state. Art, philosophy, and luxury were viewed with suspicion, if not outright prohibited. On the other hand, Athens, a stark contrast. While Sparta was rigid and hierarchical, Athens was evolving towards a radically new concept: democracy. Of course, it was not the democracy we know today, because citizenship was limited to adult males born free to Athenian parents, excluding women, slaves, and resident foreigners. But within this group, the idea that citizens could actively participate in government was revolutionary. Every citizen had the right and duty to take part in the ecclesia, the assembly that discussed and voted on laws. Imagine thousands of men gathering on a hill, the Knicks, to debate matters of state, with orators challenging each other with rhetoric and logic. It was a system that promoted freedom of expression, the exchange of ideas, and in theory, equality before the law. Athens became a melting pot of intellect and creativity, a place where philosophy flourished. Theatre took shape with tragedies and comedies that still touch us today, and art reached heights of aesthetic perfection. While Sparta sought stability and conservation, Athens found its strength in innovation and debate. The diversity of these polisai, while often generating conflict, also incredibly enriched Greek civilization, offering alternative models of social and political organization that we still study and in some ways emulate today. Yet, this vibrant Greek diversity was threatened by a colossal outside force: the Persian Empire. Imagine a vast empire stretching from India to Egypt with resources and an army of unprecedented size for the time. This empire, under the leadership of Darius the Persian and then his son Xerxes, had a simple goal: to subdue the small and fragmented Greek polis. This was not just a military clash, but a real conflict between two worlds, two philosophies: the freedom of the polis against the autocracy of an emperor who considered himself divine. In 490 BC, the first Persian wave hit Greece. The Persian army landed at Marathon, a plain northeast of Athens. Against all odds, a small Athenian contingent, led by General Miltiades, confronted and routed the numerically superior Persian army. It was an incredible victory, a triumph of tactics and determination. Legend has it that a messenger, Pheidippides, ran over 42 kilometers to Athens to announce the victory, later dying from the effort. This victory gave the Greeks invaluable self-confidence. 10 years later, in 480 BC, the Persian Empire returned with a vengeance. Xerxes I led an even larger army and navy, so numerous that it is said they drank entire rivers in crossing them. The Greeks understood that they could not face them alone and united in a Panhellenic league. But how to stop such an overwhelming tide? The answer came from a narrow mountainous pass, Thermopylae. Here, a small contingent of about 7,000 Greeks, including the legendary 300 Spartans led by King Leonidas, prepared to hold their own against the Persian army. For 3 days, the 300 and their allies fought with unprecedented ferocity and discipline, inflicting very heavy losses on the Persians. Eventually, betrayed by a local shepherd, the Greeks were outflanked. Leonidas and his Spartans, aware of their fate, remained to fight to the last man, sacrificing themselves to allow the bulk of the Greek army to retreat and to delay the Persian advance. The sacrifice became an enduring symbol of heroism and resistance. While the Persian army advanced, sacking and burning Athens, the Greek fleet, composed mainly of Athenian ships and led by the brilliant strategist Themistocles, prepared for the decisive clash. The Battle of Salamis, which took place in a narrow strait of sea, was one of the greatest naval victories in history. Themistocles, with incredible cunning, lured the massive Persian fleet into the narrow waters of Salamis, where their large ships could not maneuver effectively. The agile Greek triremes, with their sharp beaks, moved swiftly, ramming and sinking hundreds of Persian ships. It was a total defeat for Xerxes' fleet. This victory not only saved Greece from invasion but marked the end of Persian expansionism in Europe. The Persian Wars were not just a series of battles, they were the moment when the nascent West confronted the East and chose to preserve its freedom and its distinctive culture, laying the foundations for its future development. With the Persian threat vanquished, Athens emerged as the dominant polis, and what followed was a period of incredible flourish known as the Age of Pericles. Pericles, a charismatic orator and astute politician, led Athens into a golden age of economic prosperity, cultural splendor, and political apogee. Athens became a beacon of excellence in all fields. Imagine walking through the streets of Athens at that time. The Parthenon, the most iconic symbol of classical architecture, stood majestically on the Acropolis, a celebration of Athenian greatness and the goddess Athena. It was not just a temple, but a masterpiece of mathematical proportions and aesthetic perfection, still studied today for its beauty and engineering. But the age of Pericles wasn't just architecture and art. It was the era when the most brilliant minds in Western history walked the streets of Athens. Socrates, with his method of philosophical investigation based on dialogue and the questioning of every certainty, laid the foundations of critical thinking. His student Plato, with his theories on ideas and his vision of a just society in the Republic, influenced politics and philosophy for millennia. And Plato's student, Aristotle, with his empirical approach and his vast output on logic, ethics, politics, biology, and physics, became the teacher of those who know for future generations. Athenian theatre, with the tragedies of Sophocles and Euripides and the comedies of Aristophanes, explored the depths of the human soul and social issues with a surprising modernity. Historiography, with Herodotus and Thucydides, transformed the simple chronicle into a critical analysis of events. Athens, during this period, was not just a city but an idea, a laboratory of democracy, and an intellectual center that laid the foundations for much of our Western culture. Yet, as often happens, every golden age is followed by changes. The wars between the Polis, particularly the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, weakened Greece, leaving it vulnerable to new emerging powers. And this is where a figure destined to change the course of history enters the scene: Alexander the Great. Alexander was not Greek in the traditional sense. He was the king of Macedonia, a semi-barbarian kingdom north of Greece which under his father Philip II had already demonstrated formidable military power. After Philip's death, Alexander, then only 20 years old, inherited a trained army and a dream to unify Greece and then avenge the ancient Persian insults. In less than 10 years, Alexander accomplished astonishing military feats. He conquered the Persian Empire, expanding his dominions from Egypt, where he was acclaimed pharaoh, to the borders of India. His march was an epic of pitched battles won against numerically superior forces, of sieges overcome with ingenuity, and of cities founded along his route, many of them named Alexandria in his honor. But his legacy was not only military. Alexander had been educated by Aristotle himself and brought with him a deep respect for Greek culture. His vision was not just one of conquest, but of fusion. Wherever he went, he founded cities, encouraged marriage between his soldiers and local women, and promoted the spread of the Greek language, the koine, and Greek ideas. This process, known as Hellenism now or Noasani, was one of the greatest cultural revolutions in history. Imagine a world where Greek art fused with Eastern traditions, where Greek philosophy was debated in Egyptian temples and Persian palaces, where Greek science and medicine were enriched by new knowledge from the East. It was no longer the Greece of small polis, but a cosmopolitan civilization, a cultural melting pot of epochal proportions. Alexandria in Egypt, with its legendary library and lighthouse, became the new intellectual center of the Hellenistic world, surpassing even Athens in grandeur and innovation. Hellenism had a profound and lasting impact. Its influence is visible in the architecture, art, philosophy, science, and even the language that permeated much of the ancient world, paving the way for the Roman Empire and influencing cultures far beyond the borders of the Mediterranean. The history of ancient Greece, then, is a tale of invention, struggle, and influence. From the birth of citizenship in the polis, through the epical challenge of the Persian wars that defined its identity, to the cultural splendor of Athens and the global spread of Greek culture through Alexander the Great, this civilization has left an indelible mark on the history of humanity. Their ideas about government, liberty, philosophy, and beauty continue to resonate today, making their story not just a chapter of the past, but a living, breathing part of our present.